So welcome back to another Clear Creek internal leadership podcast. As you know, from week one, we interviewed Brian talking about important qualities for leaders, and then week two, we interviewed Justin talking about the importance of details and ideas. And this week, we get to talk with Mr. Jerry Marti, our principal owner, about what it takes to be successful. But first, Jerry, what got you involved with Clear Creek? How did you find Clear Creek?
That was, like a lot of things in my life, an interesting story. I actually met Brian several years ago. He called on Lamar Country Club, and I was on the board of Lamar Country Club, and I remember leading the charge not to bring on Clear Creek golf cars into the fold. And my reasoning was we were a private golf course. Most every member had their own golf cart. But the thing that stands out to me about that interaction was after we turned Brian down and elected not to bring on a fleet of golf carts, I remember Brian coming back in, and while he was disappointed, made a point of saying, look, I think you all made the wrong decision. However, if you ever need anything from me, you call me and I'll be glad to help. And that made quite an impression on me. Well, now roll the calendar forward maybe 10 years, and one of my hobbies is I get on the internet and see about things that are for sale. And I came across Clear Creek, met Mark Ringenberg and visited with him, and he said, hey, I'd like to bring my general manager with me, and it was Brian. And so Brian and I connected again, and one thing led to another, and here we are.
Wow. That kind of rolls in with what Brian talked about in week one, of knowing when to push customers and when to be more concerned about relationships. That's a really neat. I'd never heard that full story. That's awesome.
Yeah, and one of the things I've observed over the last few years with Brian that, again, I continue to be impressed with and I'm thankful for, is the fact that he does put the customer's needs first and making sure that it's a good fit for them. And one of the things that I remember seeing right after we got involved in Clear Creek was the Blessings had a fleet that was rolling over, and they were going to be hosting the NCAA championships for men and women. And Brian went to them and said, hey, if you'll bring on your new fleet now, I won't pick up your old fleet till after the tournament's over. And while it might have cost Clear Creek a little bit of money on the front end, he did right by the customer, and the customer was extremely happy, and those kinds of things will continue to serve us well going forward.
Yeah, and that really kind of dovetails into what I wanted to talk to you about, of being successful as a business, as leaders within the business, as employees. So with that, kind of setting that expectation with the customer of, hey, we're more worried about you being successful, because then that will make us successful. Share with us about that.
Yeah, so that's exactly right. I remember one of the vendors that I've had in the past, and every single time he got up to speak with our group, he thanked us for our business. And I found it really ironic because we didn't have a choice who we bought from. At the time I was with McDonald's, and our primary supplier, we didn't have any choice who we bought our hamburger from or who we bought our ketchup from. He was the only choice we had. But yet he never took that relationship for granted. And he always strived to do right by us. And he thanked us for our business continually. And one of the things he said was, if it's good for you, we know it's going to be good for us. And so I've tried to adapt that in what I tell our customers whenever I get an opportunity is, look, I know you have choices, and I know that if it's good for your business, it'll be good for our business.
Yeah, that's great. So how do we, as whether it's in the parts department or sales or transportation or service or whatever, how do we kind of walk customers through that of because we're trying to make a sale? Sure. or get them, how do we kind of on that front line do that?
Yeah, so with them, I think it's important that everybody in the organization thinks of themselves as being in sales, that they put on a good front for the company and trying to do right by the customer, Sometimes that's easier than others. And then at the same time, not ever getting greedy with the customers. In other words, just because we think we could make an extra buck or two, don't do that as long as we're within our parameters of what we need to do to make a profit, is don't go out and try to hit a grand slam against somebody.
Mm-hmm.
Just we'll do it a single at a time. And that's served us well, and hopefully will continue to serve us well.
That's great. So as we keep talking about leadership and developing leaders within the company, what sort of tools do leaders need? What do you look to instill in leaders? How can we get better?
It's really starting with where you are today. And it doesn't matter what you've done in the past. And one of my analogies with that is, Trey, when is the very best time to plant a shade tree? And the question is, well, the very best time would have been 40 or 50 years ago. But if you didn't plant the shade tree then the next best time is start today. So plant that shade tree today so that it'll reap a benefit to you in the future. And, for me, most of the folks in this organization didn't see me 40 or 50 years ago. They see me today. And I've been blessed to have learned several things over the last few decades. One of the things that I think about myself is I really feel like I'm a 12-year-old kid with a newspaper route and a bicycle. And I'm just adjusted for inflation. and after, I don't enjoy what I'm doing today any more than I did when I was 12 years old with a bicycle. Or after high school, in the summers after high school, I drove an 18-wheel truck. And then in my 20s, I was managing a truck stop. And then in my 30s, I became a McDonald's franchisee. And I've enjoyed each and every one of those jobs, just like I enjoy what I'm doing today. And what I'm in today, this is really the first season of life that I've been in that I'm not a doer. Now I feel like my job is to help enable people to do their jobs, give them the tools, and then get out of the way and let them do it. And so this is the first time that I haven't been the one that was able to do any job in the organization. And so I'm still learning and growing and realizing that I've got to be able to entrust people to do their job, and then hopefully they're going to go out and do it.
Yeah, so that's good, like as a leader, to entrust the people around you and empower them, right? To get them to do that. And something you said really caught my attention was knowing how to do every position in an organization. Can you talk about that? Yeah,
so for the early years of my career, that's what I did. I mean, I could do every single job in the company that I was involved with. Doesn't mean I was the best person at doing that job, but I could do that. If you didn't show up for work, I could take your place. Well, today I can't do that. I can't. I'm involved with Clear Creek, and I can't diagnose problems on a golf cart. I couldn't begin to do all of the accounting work that goes into our company. I could probably learn to do some of the jobs, but not nearly as well as the folks that are here doing them day in and day out.
So would you recommend, though, like for someone in leadership or even just an employee, as we all have leadership qualities, of trying to find that, make that skill or talent you don't have, and then try and grow into that and develop more of that?
Oh, absolutely. I think back to some of the sayings I heard growing up, or even in my early adulthood, and one of them was from an uncle, and he would say, Jerry, if you go into a job and you only do what you get paid to do, then you will only get paid for what you do. And you got to think about that one for a moment to let it set in. But what he was telling me is, look, anything that you do with a company, take initiative, look for other things to do. It needs to be part of your job to make that company successful. because if they're successful, then that's going to transfer to you. It kind of goes back to the shade tree analogy of growing and developing over time. And then another one that my father taught me was if you watch the pennies, the dollars will take care of themselves. So again, looking for the details in things and making sure that I do and now the rest of our team does is looking at the details. Don't just think, oh, well, that doesn't matter. The little stuff matters, and that's what can help set us apart as we continue to move forward.
So as we're developing people, developing leadership within the company, how do you train up talent? Like, you see someone who's talented or a hard worker. How do you go about, or would recommend going about, training up talent to make people more successful?
Sure. So one of the things I found out is I'm not good about judging talent before they get on the team, but I'm in good company because people that do that for a living don't do a good job of it either. For instance, Tom Brady wasn't taken until the 6th round of the draft with the 199th pick, or Albert Pujols wasn't taken until the 13th round of the draft with the 402nd pick. So it's not so much about evaluating the talent before they get here, because we're going to have some hits and we're going to have some misses, but it's more about what happens after they're on the team and how they develop. And over the years, I've had people that came in and started like gangbusters, but then just didn't continue to develop. And that can be because of a family issue. It can be because they don't get along with other employees. It can be they feel like they got slighted in something. And so the challenge is, how do we do that day in and day out to be the best employee we can be? And on the one hand, it's trusting that if I do my best and I've got the company's best interest at heart, that eventually that's going to come to me as well.
That's really good. And that's kind of touched on things that Brian and Justin have both said and shared continually, and both in their videos, but also in meetings and personal conversations and stuff.
One other illustration is probably one of my favorite illustrations out of my own life. Was one of the things I expect from team members is, I want your honest opinion, even if you know it disagrees with my opinion. And several years ago, I had a supervisor, also by the name of Brian, different company, came to me and said, hey, I found a young man. He's working for a competitor. I think we ought to hire him, bring him on board. I think he'd do us a good job. And he said his name is Mike Kelly. And I said, stop right there, Brian. I know Mike Kelly, and Mike Kelly will never work for me. And the next day, Brian came to me and he said, Jerry, I went home and I thought about what we talked about yesterday, and I really think we ought to hire Mike. Yeah. And I said, Brian,
bold move.
Bold move. But he believed me when I told him, give me your honest opinion, even if you know it disagrees with me. I said, Brian, what part of yesterday's conversation was unclear to you? Absolutely not. There's no way that guy is going to work for me. And I swear, the very next day, he came to me again. And he said, Jerry, now before you say anything, I want you to hear me out. I went and I watched Mike work yesterday at his job. And he's really good at it. And we need him. I think we ought to hire Mike. And I said, okay, Brian, I'm going to pull a Pontius Pilate. If you want him, you can have him. But I'm washing my hands of the deal. He's all yours. And but when he screws things up, you've got to fix it. Because I'm out of this. And so he does hire Mike. And Mike comes to work for us. This is when I was with McDonald's. And through the worst possible storm possible, Mike has been with us just a few months, and I had another assistant manager leave in one of our other stores nobody else wanted the job because it was going to require them to switch stores, drive. And Mike was young and hungry, and he said, well, I'll do it. And it's like, oh, you got to be kidding me. You know, you've just been with us a few months, and now you're going to be the second person in charge of this restaurant. But he took it, even though it required him to drive about 50 miles a day each way. Well, then, to make matters worse, in another few months, that manager leaves. And so now Mike is going to be the number one manager of one of my restaurants that does over $1 million a year in sales. And here's a guy that personally I don't get along with because he just drives me nuts. Okay? Our personalities just didn't clash, but he was a really good worker. And he did a fabulous job, but we just didn't get along. And a few years later, Mike gets recognized by McDonald's Corporation as being one of the top 1% managers worldwide. And you know, to this day, now Mike and I are really good friends, and he doesn't drive me nuts. So it required growth on my part. It required some maturity on his part, but it was more on me than it was on him, because really my ill feelings toward him went back to when he was a teenager. Well, I don't know about you, Trey, but I don't want to be judged by what I was like as a teenager.
Yeah.
I'm not even sure I want to be judged how I was 10 years ago. Right?
Yeah.
So, again, we're all growing, we're all developing, and just don't get upset because this one thing doesn't go your way. It's my poster child illustration of why give me your honest opinion, even if you know it disagrees with me, because Brian had that confidence that he could do it, and then be willing to adjust. I mean, I hesitate to wonder where I would be today if Mike Kelly had not joined our organization. Years and years later, almost 20 years later, Mike came to me and he said, I'd like to run to become the state rep for our district in the state of Missouri, and I want to get your opinion. And I said, I'm against it. He said, why? I said, because I don't want you leaving the company. He said, you are that valuable to our company. And he said, well, you know what? I've got a plan. I want to do both. I said, I think you're nuts. And he laid out what he wanted to do. And I said, you know what? You've earned the right to try because of what you've done in the past. And anyway, Mike ran for and became our state representative. And he continued to be the general manager of one of my restaurants and did a phenomenal job for a couple of years.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
It really is.
Speaking, talking about success and all the stuff that goes into it, and building leaders. Wow. Jerry, I wish we could I'd just sit here and just ask questions just to get stories out of you. Just keep telling stories.
Right.
That's awesome. Is there anything, we'll get ready to close here in just a second. Is there anything you want to leave us with?
Just what I would encourage people to do is do your best. In a lot of ways, I don't think it's ever been easier to be successful in America than it is today. Because in your great-grandfather's day, if he wanted to set himself apart, he really had to bust it. Because there were a lot of people striving to set themselves apart. That's not necessarily true today. Now, I will say this about the Clear Creek team. I'm very impressed because we got a lot of people that are out there busting it. And I think that's one reason why we've been so successful the last few years, and with the exponential growth and with the growth that's on the horizon. I mean, we've got some exciting things that I think could come to fruition in the next few months or years. And if they do, hold on, because I mean, you think it's been exciting the last 3 years. I think the best is still yet to come.
Wow. I assume we can't get a behind the scenes kind of pull things out of Jerry. I don't know if I'm that good of an interviewer to get him to spill secrets. But
well, it's the sad part of it is it's never over till it's over.
Yeah.
And I think it's pretty well known within the company that we thought we had an opportunity coming forward in Hot Springs this past year, and that fell through for whatever reason, and we'll see what happens here in the next few months or few years.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Jerry. Just to wrap it up, the very last thing, I know faith is important for a lot of us in the company. And I asked Brian and Justin this both, but how has faith played a role in your life and your success and just where you've been?
Sure. Well, first of all, I don't know how anybody in the world goes through this world and can deny the hand of God in this world. I mean, I'm not a scientist, but you look at creation and the orderliness of creation, and there's not one thing in my life that gets better by inattention. Mm-hmm. The only way things get better is if I'm purposeful about it. And so when I look at creation, I think that's obvious. Now, the part that I can get, and I understand why maybe people are mad at God, is, maybe you had poor parents, and you think, how can God be in this if I had poor parents? Or, maybe you've got a misfit mate, and you think, how did this happen? Or maybe you got a bad boss, and I've been done wrong that way. Or you fill in the blank why. When you're growing up, I'm too short, or I'm too tall, mm-hmm. or I'm overweight, or, again, you fill in the blank with what it is that you're mad at God for. And one of the things that I think all of us need to remember is there's not a single thing that's ever happened in our lives that caught God off hand. Mm-hmm. He knows all of this. So what are we going to do in response to that? And what He desires from each one of us is a relationship with Him. The one with most people in this organization are aware of is our son Jeremy. And most people might think, outside looking in, well, Jeremy's not normal. Well, first of all, he's way more normal than I would have given people with his disability before I knew him. And I tell folks, short of accepting Jesus Christ as my personal Lord and Savior, and having my wife Debbie choose to marry me when I ask her, and I don't mean to take anything away from my kids, but Jeremy is the third biggest blessing in my life. Mm-hmm. God has taught me so much through him. And one is, celebrate every victory in your life, regardless of how small it may be. When Jeremy was growing up and learning, just him making verbal sounds was a victory. And the experts told my wife he will never talk. Well, obviously, anybody in the organization who's been around Jeremy, they know he can talk. Yeah. Now, he doesn't have conversational speech like what we're having, but he doesn't have any trouble communicating. Mm-hmm. And just the abilities that he has, his outlook on life, I wish that I had the same outlook on life that he has. But he's helping teach me, and God is doing that through him. And you're right on the stories. I mean, I could just go on and on, but I remember one when he was very small, and I was having one of those days at work. I mean, we all have them, and it's kind of one of those deals. If I could have thrown the keys on the counter and walked away, I would have. I mean, that's how frustrated I was at that particular time. And I got home, and Jeremy, all he wanted to do was be held. And I'd hold him and set him down, and he'd come running right back to me. Well, you know what? After about an hour of holding him, I realized everything was all right. Mm. That this other didn't really matter. And then another one a few years later, again, we all have those days. And I came home, and he sensed that something wasn't right. And he said, "Dad, you okay?" I said, "Yeah, buddy, I'm okay. I'm just living the dream." Bad dream? So, living the dream can be a nondescript term in our household. Yeah. But just all of those things, realizing that not every day is going to be a great day. But in spite of that, God doesn't tell us give thanks for all things, but He does tell us to give thanks in all things. And just realizing, okay, what is it that you want me to learn from this? Because we all have several things in our life that have happened that maybe through no fault of our own seem like it's bad. Well, just, okay, God, what do you want me to learn from this? Is there a lesson? And I think with Jeremy, and that one's easy to talk about. Here we are 26 years later, again, kind of the growth that's happened over the years, is realizing that what may seem like a bad thing today can grow and develop into something that's a real blessing for us going forward.
Yeah, what a great way to end it, Jerry. Thank you. And what a blessing that you and your family and J-Dog, has been to, I think, everybody at Clear Creek. We truly appreciate you and what you've done, and especially sharing your stories and your wisdom with us today. So with that, we'll wrap up our 3-part series, and hopefully we'll get to do more of these down the road.
Super.
Thanks
for your time, Trey.